Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dave. I'm the CTO of Seenit. I want to talk to you today about how we've been using Couchbase and the power of Couchbase to revolutionize the way large organizations are storytelling and producing video at scale. It's kind of, I feel like what I'm doing here is basically giving a big Dave-shaped rubber stamp of approval to everything that Matt and Ravi and Scott were talking about this morning, and just go, yep, it does do that. You can trust me. So a brief history of Seenit. We were founded in 2014. So we're still quite a young company, still quite small, about 35 people now. And we provide an enterprise-ready video collaboration platform for people who want to engage with their communities, both large and small. So these could be your employees. So some of our clients have 250,000 employees, and they want to work with them to tell stories and tell the stories that matter to them. Or it could be something where you're a retailer and you want to engage with your clientele and work out what are they getting out of your product, what are they enjoying, and so on. And we've been able to leverage, as a small team, we've been able to leverage our relationship with both Google and Couchbase to basically do more with less and to take more risks. I kind of joke sometimes that we outsource our development to Couchbase and Google because they're doing so much work that we want to do but could never do with the size of the team that we have. So we have a very expensive outsourced team that kind of does it for us. Ultimately, because we had the luxury of not dealing with anything, we had no product 4 years ago, we had a vision. We had both a product vision and a technical vision. And we always knew from the beginning that to do that and to see that vision become fruitful, we needed to have a forward-thinking database and database provider that had a similar passion for innovation that we did. So some of the people we work with, we've been working a lot now in New York. Actually, we work with Viacom, NBC, Gannett, who own USA Today, and we just started working with Coca-Cola in Atlanta. But in the UK, we work with a lot of financial institutions, so HSBC, UBS, Barclays, and we also work with some of the big firms like Accenture and the BBC and BT Sport to power their fan engagement system. So BT Sport use a lot of our footage that comes through our platform on their TV shows. And for our clients, they've been running some incredible projects, and I'll talk through some of the use cases of those that they've had, and the features that we've been able to develop on top of the capabilities that Couchbase has given us have really had huge levels of positive feedback from them. So if you look at the video landscape today, you basically have three key methods. There's traditional production where just down the road, we had a tour of the NASDAQ marketplace yesterday, and they have a studio probably about as big as this room, filled with very, very expensive film equipment that requires trained operators, an expensive studio to run it, and experience, but looks great, very high standard, slick. You have then the influencer marketplace where you're dealing with individuals who are, whether they're experts or not, are still influential within their sphere. They've got a big fan base and they've just developed a very good way of telling their own stories. But the authenticity of those is dying. People are becoming less trustworthy of so-called influencers, especially on Instagram and so on. You have a lot of celebrities who are having to put effectively disclosures on all their posts to say, oh, this post was sponsored by so-and-so. And then you have UGC. UGC became a big thing several years ago, but ultimately that's what drives a level of authenticity about it, and it's the reason why we all like watching cat videos on Facebook and things like that, because you kind of think, well, that wasn't set up, that was natural, and I can relate to it. But you can't guarantee the quality of it. You can't stop someone filming vertically when you want to broadcast it on TV. You can't guarantee that they're going to not be like shaking their camera the whole time. So we were like, okay, how can we resolve that, and how can we allow people to manage that volume and scale of video, and deal with that in an effective way and an efficient way. And this is really quite interesting. The key trends that we're seeing, especially in video, if you look at what sources of information do you trust, and naturally friends and family is number one by quite a margin. If your friends and family say, hey, you should go and check this film out, you're far more likely to trust them than probably a reviewer or a critic, unless you know them personally. And then the second one is expert. So the critics then become like that, and that's ultimately why that's why I'm on stage and not someone from Couchbase, because you're far more likely to trust me than a sales guy telling you, hey, we've got all this great stuff, go and use it. So if I'm here talking about it, it adds that level of authenticity. So we apply that same logic to the video systems. And so that's why when we're dealing with people who want to engage with their employees, how can we allow the stories that are being told to be insightful and to feel like they're real? We did some really interesting projects with companies who were having difficulties with the way their values were being perceived across their organizations. And these are companies with 250,000 employees, and they were getting hammered in the press for a number of reasons. And they said, well, we need to try and work out why people feel like this, and how can we improve. So they ran a big campaign and then said, okay, great, now we can understand this more and build a community around this and listen to what people are saying. And it had a huge impact to the point where they were changing HR policies on the back of some of the feedback they were getting. So, ultimately it comes to this really interesting quote, which is, a brand is no longer what we tell consumers it is, it's what consumers tell each other it is. It's great that Couchbase can come to us and say, we're an engagement database, but what does that actually mean to us as the consumers of that product? Well, I can sit here and talk to you about it and say, well, yeah, it is, because it's kind of powering what we're doing. And ultimately our whole vision and mission is about engagement and engaging with your community, whoever that is. So human-to-human interaction, so me talking to you guys, is the best and most dynamic way of telling a story. You could read a blog post by me, you might even watch a YouTube video, but me being here and talking to you, given the opportunity to ask me questions, is much more impactful and influential. And it's the same reason why the people who live in those stories have a much better impact. Again, because I'm a hands-on CTO, I develop these systems, so I kind of know the difficulties that I had with Couchbase, or not having Couchbase and then putting it in and then being able to reap the benefits of everything it brings in. It's much more meaningful than if someone else was to do it. So again, this whole ecosystem that we deal with, specifically in our case around video, is then creating greater reach, greater engagement, and greater impact on the videos that are being generated on the back of what we work with. So that could be anything from a 10-minute mini documentary about, hey, why should you come and work for this company? Or it could be a company like Accenture who uses for their graduate recruitment program, and they get all of the graduates who go through their program to talk on video about what they got out of the platform, what they got out of the graduate program, why they're excited about the future. That has a much better impact and engagement than their CEO in a glossy video saying, yeah, our graduate recruitment program was great. The people who are telling the story are the ones who lived in it, so they're the best people to do that. So we want to close the loop on that entire community ecosystem. And by that I mean we want to make sure that from an editorial perspective and a production perspective, there are efficiencies to be had, that the communities feel listened to, and that the communities are generating good content on the back of seeing other good content. So this ultimately then led to our technical vision, which is to create a best-in-class analysis engine that allows Seenit and our customers to derive actionable insights and intelligence intelligence from community-generated video and photo content. So the actionable insights is really the key part of this. It's all that. It's great to get insight into what people are talking about, what people are filming, what people are saying, but unless you can do anything on the back of that, there isn't really much point. So how do we get there? What's our journey to get to this vision? And actually, we're pretty far along. So for each video, we generate hundreds of pieces of metadata, metrics about the video using a variety of machine learning and analysis techniques. So for example, someone uploads a video and it immediately goes into a pipeline of about 10 different operations. And some of that is to do object recognition. So what is in the video? So it could be anything from a nature piece where it will identify animals, trees, green, abstract concepts like that. Or if I'm filming here, it'll probably pick up seminar, academic seminar, people smiling, hopefully. And then that then all goes into the Couchbase document for that specific video. We run auto-transcription to pull out what people are actually saying. And then we also run natural language processing on the top of that to pull out what people are talking about, so the specific entities that they're speaking about, and how positively and negatively were they speaking about that thing. So there's some really interesting analysis techniques that we can drive off the back of that to provide insight to companies at an aggregate level. But what then we can do is also use that to provide direction, video direction to the people who are actually filming. So we now run, again, a number of different analysis techniques on the videos as they come in, one of which is a scoring of the audio noise. So is it noisy? We call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have 3 different tiers, basically. If it's good, then we don't need to do anything. But it's scored highly as a ranking system. There's the ugly, which is it's too noisy and an editor will not touch this video at all because there just isn't any usable audio in there. On the back of that, we can actually then trigger, based on now using eventing, to trigger a push message back to the user in the app, almost real time, to say, hey, thanks for your video, but we just thought it was too noisy, can you reshoot it? That way we haven't lost the moment, you haven't lost the opportunity in the place where that person was, or even the thought process that they had at the time. So using all of that and linking it back up gives us that opportunity to re-engage with that person straight away. We do the same thing with the visual analysis. So are they shaky? Is it well exposed? Is it in focus? So if someone's shooting themselves with a back to a window, odds are they're probably not going to be well lit, and we want to let them know that as early as possible. Right now we do all of that processing in the cloud, but it's so fast that it's almost real time once I've uploaded that video. So that actionable insight was a really key part of what we wanted to do. Then also the ability to search that content. So one of our clients had a photo competition. They got something like 10,000 photos submitted from their employees across, I think, 70 different countries. And they wanted to produce a 2-minute video on the back of that to say, this is what matters to you guys. This is what matters to our employees, and this is your story. This is what you mean by this theme. And the themes might be something like insight or intelligence or happiness. And they had all of this content, but they were like, well, great, we've got all this content, but we're kind of like lost now. We've got too much. We don't know what to do with it all. Fortunately, because we had all of the object recognition in there and being able to recognize like themes, they could use our search capability, which was implemented on top of FullText Search, to basically say, right, I want to find these things. And they produced this amazing 2-minute video, which sadly I can't share with you, on that whole set of 10,000 photos. Their words were, we would not have been able to do this without the ability to search content in the way that we can with you guys. So that ability to pull together machine learning, extracts, and intelligence meant that we could provide them with a way of operating at scale that they could never do before. But what we can also do, because we're scoring that content, we can then rank the content by whatever the editor is interested in. So if the editor doesn't care about audio, they can just switch that part off, and it will then be just graded by visual quality. But if they're just looking for some voiceover stuff, they can switch off visual and turn off audio, and then we can rank accordingly for that. So that's ultimately about increasing the production efficiency and the turnaround time for these videos. It's great that we can get all of this content in, but if you can't do anything with it, or if you're sort of overwhelmed by the amount of content you're getting, then there isn't really much point doing that either. But then to close that loop, we want to recognize those people and give them feedback and say, hey, you're doing really good. And ultimately a strong signal for that is that they made the final cut. They were in the edit that was produced and distributed onto whatever platform they choose. So for that, again, it's be able to store and recognize and ultimately score our contributors over time to say, this person is really good at shooting this type of video, and they're really good at pieces to camera or pan shots or crowd shots or taking photos of landscapes and so on. But that's great. We can do all of that, and it sounds great, and it's very fancy, and there's some really nice technology behind the scenes. But we also need to be agile and flexible. We want to drive innovation and explore new opportunities. We need to scale it rapidly as our business grows. We've seen an incredible 4 years of growth. The clients we're working with, the scale at which they operate at, is huge, and we need to be able to scale up without going through the old school rack and stack hardware. We've got a new database cluster we need to add. How are we going to do that? And we need to do that with a small team. We're not a big engineering team. We, for many years, had no operational team. It's one person now, but for a lot of the time it was just me. We have one back-end developer and one front-end developer. We need to do all of this stuff in a way that doesn't require us to have the database in the way. We didn't want to have the database as being the limiting factor in what we were building. So it turns out a revolutionary vision requires a revolutionary database, which sounds kind of cheesy and a bit markety, but I actually stand by it. And if this all doesn't work out anyway, I've got a good job in tagline and branding and marketing. But it's basically about the mindset. It's about the mindset that we have and the mindset that the Couchbase team have, and everybody who works with them, and the customers like you guys who are doing things that are pushing the boundaries of what you want to do. There is absolutely no way that we would have been able to do what we've done with the team size we had and in the time we did it in without being able to have a Couchbase type database behind us. So how did we get there with Couchbase? What was our journey like? So the relationship actually started pre-Seenit. So I'd actually been working with Couchbase over 4 years ago. I was working on a media distribution platform for theme parks, and we'd been looking at Couchbase Lite as a thing to help power that. I left that company and joined Seenit in its very early stage. I thought, well, actually, I've kind of learned a lot from what the guys at Couchbase are doing. This seems like a good fit for where we're going to go. It gives us the agility. It gives us the ability to use that flexible JSON schema that we always hear about to say, well, we can just add stuff. We don't need to worry about schema changes. I don't need to be worrying about operational complexity issues. I can just do it. So we actually started, I think our first release back in 2014 was powered by Couchbase 2.2. So we've come a long way. I think we've been on every version and point release since then. And I think we might have skipped one or two, but we have a habit of running DP in production. So at least for FullText Search, we've been running that live for over a year now. So we're not too afraid of doing that. Then we went from, back in 2.2, there was no Nikhil. Nikhil didn't exist back then. It was just a spark in someone's eye. So we were using manual global secondary indexing. We were using map-reduced views, and that was it, really. We had no flexible model to work with from a querying perspective. So when Nikhil came along, we were like, amazing. From a development perspective, it's a language that almost all developers are familiar with. If they're not, then it's very easy for them to look at the plethora of information and data out there about how it works and why it works and what a join is and what's the difference between these types of joins. So Nikhil really changed the way we were doing things. Then we moved from Nikhil, and now we're using a lot more FTS and the FullText Search for that. And now analytics and eventing. And I'll go into more detail about what we did with these, but the ability to have a single point of operational overhead for you in one database platform, we found was a really key part of allowing us to do this in a fast and lean way. So the first part was Nikhil. So Nikhil transformed the way we could develop new features. As I said, we had that flexible data model, but that familiarity of the SQL syntax allowed us to develop new features without having to think about things like, well, how does manual secondary indexing work for this, or how does MapReduce work for this? And MapReduce was actually one of the things that developers that we were hiring had a real trouble just sort of getting their head around. It was an unfamiliar concept to them. So it really helped. And then we actually started to be able to use event-based logging for our audit trail. So every action, every change, every status change that was done on the platform was logged as a separate event with context, time, what the actual action was in Couchbase. That allowed us to do a huge amount of querying to understand how people are using the product. Are they using this thing more than this thing? Do different clients have different usage patterns? We could really start to understand that a lot more without having to, and again, it was a familiar system for us, so we didn't have to integrate a third party. We didn't have to worry about other big data solutions to do this. We just did it and it worked. So who did when, what was the mutation? We can figure all of that out. And then understanding it without building an expensive BI tool into it, which was, again, early days, limited funding, early stage startup. We didn't have the flexibility of being able to invest in a full BI suite. But along comes analytics, and we're kind of greedy. Once we've got a little taste of something, we just want the whole lot. So when we were realizing that, there's Nikhil and it does all of its things and it works great from a functional perspective, but from an analytics perspective, the power of the SQL++ engine powering analytics really helped us out. So it provides more functionality. It allows you to provide greater insight into your data in a robust and industry standard format. Again, the benefits, as Ravi was talking about this morning, of SQL is that it's kind of like it's a solved problem. We know why SQL exists. It's the best part of the relational database system. So maintaining that and keeping it means that it's worked very well for us. But you still maintain that flexibility of the JSON schema. So you can still just keep adding stuff to it and changing things and not worrying about how we've got a release coming up. What are the schema changes? Do we need to worry about performance and query plan optimization and so on? It just works. You just do it. And the great thing with FTS, which I'll talk about, is that that doesn't get impacted by it at all either. So then all of that, we just XDCR from our production data over production cluster over to our data science cluster, and then our data insight analysts can query it, look at it, and say, hey, look, have you noticed this? We can A/B test. We can understand the data a lot more. We can do that without, again, having to invest in more operational overheads. So FullText Search was really after Nikhil, was the biggest game changer for us. So we were gathering a lot of video data. We were gathering a lot of metadata about the video, so object recognition down to the frame level. So not just saying there is a frog in this video. There is a frog in this video from 0 to 5 seconds, and after that it's a dog. So all of that meant we were capturing a lot of this information, but Nikhil just didn't quite cut it for the level of search and querying that we wanted to do, especially when you're searching, you want access to features like faceting, which FTS provides, And if full-text search is something you're really interested in, I gave a talk at this conference last year, which I think is up on YouTube. So I go into a lot more detail about how we use full-text search and the benefits it gives us, and actually some code snippets of how we do it. And we were hitting complexity issues with indexing for Nikhil. So the moment you have a set of filters on a page that you can have one or more or all of enabled, your ability to index that becomes much more complex. You're dealing with, well, if this happens and this happens, then use this index, otherwise use this index. So because of and that's just the nature of the way Nikhil indexes work. It's not wrong, it's just not right for what we needed. FTS shifted that, and now we could start to look at it and just say, well, it doesn't matter what we throw at it, it's all just going to work. And we wanted to provide a more natural search method. So people, again, are used to searching for things on Google and typing things in a certain way and searching in a certain way. So we didn't want to provide necessarily a really prescriptive way of finding your content. We wanted people to be able to explore and have suggested searches and predictive searches and so on. And it gave us that in a really simple and performant package. So they actually, the way we, FTS, I think before FTS came along, we predicted something like 12 weeks worth of work to integrate and implement Elasticsearch, build the code base for that, have our developers get familiar with it, understand what we wanted to do. Then FTS came along in a DP, and we were like, well, let's just give this a try. We built it in probably about half a day as a proof of concept, and shipped it into production the following week. Because it was really that simple. It required, it's basically the flick of a switch on deploying a new Couchbase node with FTS on it, so you're not running into any production risks by running that. And then the Python SDKs that we were using just worked out of the box. It's like 5 lines of code to get up and running, and then you can just search. So it didn't require any operational overhead for us to do that. The management of it was exactly the same for everything else that we were doing already for Couchbase. Eventing, so 5.5's coming out soon, I hope, and eventing is coming out. So that allows us to simplify our code base even further. Now, there's always the risk, and it's the argument that we have internally of like, yeah, but you're just moving business logic to the database, and that's never a good thing, and we're just going to go back to old Oracle triggers and things like that, and nobody wants that, really. But there's some really good use cases for it that are perhaps a little bit non-obvious. So it allows you to run, if you've not seen eventing, it allows you to run a set of functions, JavaScript functions, based on triggered mutations. So this document changed from X to Y in this field, do something. If it's a timestamp, maybe you want to add some additional data about, well, here it is in a UTC millisecond integer rather than as a date string. And the non-obvious use cases that we've been exploring are regulatory compliance. So GDPR for us is a big thing in Europe right now. So we're having to handle PII a lot more officially and have policies around it. And if we can build some of that into our code, we don't have to worry about it, and we don't have to have manual processes every few months to figure this out. We just say, well, if this data hasn't been touched for 6 months, delete it. Or flag something, or do something, call an API. It doesn't matter, but we can handle a lot of regulatory compliance now with eventing. So, in summary, Couchbase allows us to ultimately reduce our overall development costs in terms of it providing out-of-the-box integrated solutions, simplifying our overheads. We can scale up and scale down as our demand changes. We have a certain level of seasonality. Christmas is usually when people are not running so much, but then football season in the UK, when BT Sport are running, we have much higher peaks of usage. So for that, we can scale up and scale down as required, keeping our costs lean as well. And it's well documented. The SDKs are well documented, well understood. Developers, I've found, tend to like working with them. The JSON schema combined with FTS and Nikhil gives us the ability to try new things, take risks, and innovate. We don't need to worry about schemas. We don't need to worry about, yeah, but what if I do this? Will it break X, Y, and Z? Well, you just do it. Add a new document type if you want to. Just start storing stuff, and then we can look at it afterwards. And it helps us shape and maintain our competitive advantage as well. Because we're able to build these new competencies for our future a lot more efficiently, we can always be staying one step ahead of other people. We can give our clients better feedback. We can give our clients better usage. We can give them better features. And ultimately, drive innovation faster than I think we would have ever been able to without a system like Couchbase, and especially if we're running on something like MySQL. I think we would have been struggling to move at the pace that we did move at. So thank you very much. I think we've got 2 minutes or something for questions, if anyone's got any.
Questions?
This is just a question about how you're using Couchbase. Are you storing the video data itself or just the metadata?
Just the metadata. Okay. The video data, all binary data, is stored on Google Cloud Storage. So we run everything's on GCP. So Google Cloud Storage holds all of the metadata, and then we host URLs and references to those.
Other questions?
Cool. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Excellent.